Mike Bloomberg's supporters. Why? Not me, but my aunt and uncle. Basically, after she was done explaining that they hide their incomes which are very high so as to avoid paying the actual amount of taxes they should, etc., she told me he was gonna be their guy. Because that? Funniest part was I had just finished saying I basically paid a lot of money for health insurance and in taxes because I freelance. And she somehow thought that me, a poor person, actually paying my taxes, was absurd and I should somehow agree with and be proud of their cunning. My family hates them. Not defending his perspective, but I think I can offer at least some insight into the mind of one Bloomberg supporter I know, my dad. My dad, through the mid-2000s or so, identified as a Republican. But he was definitely on the more moderate side of that spectrum, conservative about economics, but anti-war, pro-environmental protections, and a leave people alone mentality on social issues. He doesn't like talking about politics, but he pays attention. He didn't like it when politicians lied or made outrageous claims, but would respect one if they seemed forthright, honest, and didn't treat him like an idiot. He doesn't really pay a lot of attention to political gamesmanship, so things like whether Bloomberg bought his way into the party doesn't really matter to him. He voted for McCain in 2008, but Obama in 2012. It was during Obama's administration that he really started to sour on the Republican Party. The more blatantly inaccurate GOP claims became, the more personally insulted he felt. Trump seemed like the culmination of everything he didn't like about the party going into 2016, and so he switched his party affiliation to Dem for the 2016 election, and voted Clinton. So now you have a man who feels abandoned by the party that used to represent his center-right views, in the Democratic Party. And here comes a candidate that seems straight out of that party he used to identify with. For people like my dad, Bloomberg is the sort of person he'd always have voted for. That isn't to say he'd only vote for Bloomberg, he's essentially in the anyone but Trump camp, but if you were to poll him, he'd pick Bloomberg. I don't know how much of his support comes from people that felt abandoned by the GOP, but from my sole, anecdotal example, I can at least kind of see it. There are plenty of people out there who want nothing to do with super progressive economic policies but despise Trump. If you want Trump out but don't agree with Bernie's economic tilt, where else should someone go? Pete getting beat up now. Warren has gone full Bernie. Klobuchar still very unknown. And Biden being Biden. Most of the Bloomberg supporters I know are former Republicans/independents who despise Donald Trump. Democrats who despise Bernie. Democrats who have resigned themselves to thinking he'll win the nomination, because that's how the world works now, and he's better than Trump. My social group is entirely comprised of white college-educated urban professionals in their 30s. So to put it, politely, the racial issues surrounding Bloomberg aren't really a concern for them. It's a big problem for Bernie supporters. He is actually going to appeal to moderates and independents because most Americans are not going to vote for a socialist. But then the debates will begin and Bloomberg is going to look like a limp dick on a stage compared to Trump's energy level. You can hate Trump but he's not boring, and sadly that's a big issue in the presidential election. I wouldn't say I'm a supporter per se, but I don't have the vitriolic hate for the man that many on Reddit seem to have. The fact is that many Democrats are allowing themselves to do the same thing that happened in 2016, prop up right-wing and Russia-sourced attacks because they attack the center. I mean Christ, until last week people were bashing Biden the same way, and Trump loved it. The whole quid pro quo was because he was trying to find more to bash Biden with, and progressives are amplifying that message right now. In 2016, when Clinton won the primary, and some in the Sanders camp yelled cheater, 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 even though Sanders got on stage with her, that shit stuck, all the way to Trump winning PA. Bloomberg is spending billions of his own money to make pro-democratic ads and clarify some of the worst Trump admin abuses to swing states. That is a net good. Play the fucking long game here, guys. Stop bashing Democrats who want good things just because they don't want enough yet. All it is serves the right wing who want none of it. One last thing, you can immediately tell it's a right-wing sourced attack if it uses the adjective Democrat instead of Democratic. I have seen this a lot from self-professed Sanders supporters, and believe this to be people pretending to be progressives to stir up resentment within the left wing. I'll bite. I had been a Biden supporter but his campaign died out pretty quickly. I support Amy Klobuchar but I doubt she gets anything more than a VP consideration. Bloomberg represents the best alternative to Bernie. I don't want Bernie. I would never vote for Trump, but I wouldn't vote for Bernie either. As a moderate, I don't want to lose the Democratic Party to the Democratic Socialist wing. Bloomberg represents the best hope to prevent a Bernie takeover. Therefore, I fully support Bloomberg. As someone who has worked for him and met him a few times, he wouldn't be the worst, but he's definitely not the best candidate. He is a very nice guy who I know. When an employee told him another employee had cancer, he immediately hired her full-time to give her health benefits. Just for reference, I worked for Bloomberg TV, so being freelance is very common in that industry. On the other hand, he is deep in bed with Wall Street. While I do believe that he understands that happy people contribute more to the economy, I would be afraid he would put Wall Street before the best interests of the rest of us. It was honestly the best company I ever worked for in terms of taking care of their employees. I was a freelance person, but I heard the benefits were amazing and totally free to employees. There was free snacks and coffee available every day, all somewhat healthy. A limited amount of lunch was given out every day, first come first serve, and they offered a full, and delicious, I might add, dinner at 7 p.m. for those of us who worked late. On top of that, every Friday was a special event like Ice Cream Friday or Hot Chocolate Bar Friday. He knew that providing these things would not only make his workers happier, but more productive, as this prevented them from having to leave the building. He is definitely not progressive enough for me, but we could definitely do worse. I don't really support him, but I will vote for anything that can beat Trump, and TBH I think he can. I'm not really supporting anyone in the Democratic primary since Yang dropped out, but the number one characteristic for me is, can you defeat Trump? I think Bloomberg probably has the best chance against Trump head-to-head. Trump is terrified of him and his huge war chest, and Trump will have trouble attacking him as he is similar to Trump in terms of where he comes from, but far richer and more successful, which triggers the shit out of Trump and will cause him to make mistakes. Will Bloomberg be a great president? No. But I don't think Mayor Pete can beat Trump, and while I wish we lived in a better world where President Bernie could actually do the shit he wants, we don't, and I think Bernie as a candidate could backfire big time. The country is simply not ready for his policies, and it will only worsen to gridlock in Congress. The whole reaction to Bloomberg on Reddit really shows you how much of a bubble this site is. BTW. If you're a younger person who mostly gets their political news from here, I really suggest you start broadening your sources of info. Bloomberg has a legit shot. It's going to be very difficult to get a serious answer, not because there is no serious tag, but there are hardly any true supporters. He has no grassroots support and has no volunteers that he had to hire people to advertise his name. Now, spending $100+ million is definitely going to get you name recognition, but it's not going to get you genuine support that you need come voting time. I used to be against Mike Bloomberg. However, when I saw his ad of a guitarist playing a couple of chords and sing some lyrics he probably wrote in 2 minutes, I was immediately convinced that he would make change for the better. I think those ads and funds will immediately stop climate change and every single one of the world's problems. His memes also never fail to connect to the young. I became such a big Mike Bloomberg supporter. My wall has posters of him, and I even have a body pillow of Bloomberg. And we also need a great representation on America, which is lazy, so we absolutely need to elect him president to show how lazy and minimalist he is, representing the rest of America. I actually went to see him when he was giving a speech about healthcare, and I was pleasantly surprised by how technical his ideas are. He is not charismatic, his speech was peppered with caveats, corrections, maybe he needs to work on it a bit. But he appears to be running for presidency not out of vanity and hunger for power. He actually does seem to be horrified by Trump. I live in a purple state and he may have bigger appeal here than in coastal areas. My husband likes him, although I think we will both vote for Buttigieg in the primary. He's a centrist who understands, contrary to popular belief, that businesses and corporations are important to the functioning of our democracy and our economy. I get that nobody cares about their employer. No one is loyal to them and no one feels they are important. But companies, and the people who found them, run them, employ people, take the risk and have the vision and ability to operate them, are super important people. Yeah, Bernie. We know everyone is equal, we are all just as important as the next person, women and men. All people with all backgrounds are the same and deserve the same. But are you serious? I think Bloomberg understands, as a very successful businessman, that the companies and the people who run them also deserve opportunities. Bernie, and his expensive socialist agenda, will cost a lot of money and employers, corporations and companies will pay for it. I am not per se a supporter, I am still undecided for the primaries, however he has recently moved to my shortlist, and I would certainly support and vote for him in the general election. I remain concerned that the more liberal hopefuls like Sanders and Warren might be too big of a push to the left, all at once, to attract the more moderate independents that are going to be needed to beat the Trumpster, rhymes with dumpster. Fittingly, I have serious doubts about Biden, who in national polls remains the favorite, and while I like Major Pete too, I also have concerns about him facing off one-on-one with Trump. Bloomberg has thus emerged as someone I have to consider, and I like some though not all of his policy ideas as well. If you did not notice, beating Trump is the #1 consideration for me this election. I'd vote for even George W. over Trump. It looks like it's Bernie, Bloomberg, or Trump. So which geriatric do I want? Well, Bernie's taxes would hurt me, and his benefits avoid me. I'm healthy and won't receive his free tuition. Trump has been fine for me personally, but his lack of environmental protection is a big turnoff. Bloomberg seems like the guy who will save the environment but be pretty lax on everything else, which is the best outcome for me. I am holding out for the debate to see what comes out of it, however.